In this video, we're going to look at the integration between PowerShell Protect and PowerShell Universal that's coming in the next version of both of those products. So you'll need PowerShell Universal at least v3 and then the PowerShell Protect version that's coming out in June. So PowerShell Universal is a tool for building web-based tools based on PowerShell scripts. You can build APIs, automation scripts such as scheduled scripts, ad hoc scripts, and then you can build user interfaces like dashboards and pages. PowerShell Protect is an anti-malware scan interface that allows you to create customizable rules for PowerShell. So that means you can look for specific network shares being used or certain strings, that kind of thing, and then you can either block or audit those scripts. And what the integration between PowerShell Universal and PowerShell Protect is going to provide is both the ability to configure PowerShell Protect from PowerShell Universal, as well as consume events produced by PowerShell Protect on your endpoints inside PowerShell Universal. And then from there, with PowerShell Universal, you can actually take action. So we have a trigger set up that allows you to look for certain rules being kind of exercised within your PowerShell Protect environment. And if that happens, they can trigger scripts inside PowerShell Universal. So I'm going to take you through a quick tour of that. First of all, what we're going to do is inside PowerShell Universal here, you can see that I'm under Security, Protect, and I have this PowerShell Protect page open here. We have two tabs, Events, which is currently empty, and Configurations, which is currently empty. I actually have PowerShell Protect already installed on this machine. So it comes down as a PowerShell module, and what you'll notice is by default it has a bunch of things already blocked. You don't even need a license or anything like that to do this. So if I do invoke expression, CMD or something, you can see now that it says the AMSI result blocked by admin begin. So it actually blocked the execution of this script. So PowerShell Protect denied the use of invoke expression. So we have a bunch of default rules that you can actually configure inside the configurations that we'll see here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create some XML configurations, deploy them to my local machine, and then see how we can consume those events in PowerShell Universal. So first of all, what we need to do is create a new configuration. I will do that by clicking that. We'll just call this our test configuration. And now I have a test configuration here. If I click Edit Configuration, you can see I have a bunch of options. So first of all, we have our default rules. These are the rules that are kind of enabled right when you install PowerShell Protect. It's what has stopped me from using invoke expression. Invoke expression is used a lot of times for malicious payloads. There was actually one that came out yesterday that uses a protocol handler inside Microsoft Office, but it actually uses invoke expression to do some stuff. So by default, we just block invoke expression, but you could adjust that inside these default rules. The other thing that you can do with PowerShell Protect is you can set up custom rules. So custom rules allow you to kind of define conditions inside scripts. So all of this is static code analysis. It doesn't actually look at necessarily the dynamic environment. Certain things it can, but in terms of the PowerShell scripts and variables and stuff like that, it's looking at a static script. So if we wanted to create a new rule, we could do something like web request, and then we could set something like command equals or contains web request. And then what this is going to do is it will trigger this rule anytime that a command that you're executing anywhere in PowerShell, it could be in a PowerShell console, PowerShell IC, VS Code, or just anything that hosts the PowerShell runtime uses web request inside one of their commands, it's going to trigger this rule. So now we have that web request rule. On the other side of things, you can take action based on those rules. So we have several actions you can take. You can block, so that's what we kind of saw with an invoke expression. You could set up a condition that matches a certain thing and then blocks it based on that condition. But if you wanted to allow it and potentially audit it, you could either send it to event log, files, HTTP, TCP, UDP, or what's new in this version, PowerShell Universal. So what I'm actually going to do first is we need an app token available for this, and you can actually use any role for this. We just need a valid app token. We want to authenticate the request coming in. And then once we have that app token, we can actually set up PowerShell Protect to take the events generated inside your PowerShell endpoints and then send them to PowerShell Universal. So we're going to add an action. We're going to say send to PowerShell Universal. I'm just going to call this Universal. My address is HTTP localhost 5000. And then I need to put an app token in here, a valid app token, to send up events to PowerShell Universal. I think I forgot to save, so we're just going to create our custom rule again. And we're going to say web request. And I want any command that contains web request. And then we're going to set this action to universal. So when this rule matches, so in this case, if the command contains web request, it is actually going to send that event up to PowerShell Universal. So I'll click OK there. One thing that is required for PowerShell Protect custom rules is a license. So this is actually a PowerShell Pro Tools license. So it's actually included as part of PowerShell Pro Tools. And then once I have that all set, I can hit save. And if we go to configurations, I have this little download button. So I'm going to click that. And you can see my config file has now downloaded. And what I actually need to do is save this into the config file that's local, the one that PowerShell Protect is going to pick up. So I have a config file in C program data PowerShell Protect config.xml. Right now it just has the default built-in rules enabled. But what I'm going to do is add my custom rules, my license file, and my custom actions to this config file. So you can kind of change where this config file is stored. It can be stored on disk, it can be stored in the registry, and you can use the registry to actually adjust what location this config file is loaded from. So I'm going to save that. It includes all the information about my license and configuration data and that kind of thing. And you can see here it's like set up some XML to check for the web request rule. So now if I come back to PowerShell, this PowerShell terminal, and I open a new PowerShell, what I'm going to do is invoke web request. And we are just going to go to Google and invoke web request against that. And what you'll see here is that from the user's perspective, nothing really happened. It called invoke web request and it returned some information. But if we actually come up to PowerShell Protect or PowerShell Universal, what you'll see is we got an event for that web request call. So it actually called back to PowerShell Universal and stored that event inside the PowerShell Universal database. So we have information like the rule that was invoked, the computer name, the domain, and the username. Additionally, we can actually set up triggers to trigger when something like this happens. So we're just going to call this protect. We'll save it. And I am just going to add a single parameter with the data parameter. So most triggers, you can use the data parameter to actually get information about what triggered this particular script. And then I'm going to go to triggers. I'm going to create a new trigger. I'm just going to call this one protect as well. I'll call the trigger script protect, and then the event that we're going to be calling is the PowerShell Protect event. So I will save that, and now we have a PowerShell Protect event that should trigger every single time an event is sent to PowerShell Universal from PowerShell Protect. So again, I will invoke my web request. If we go back to our security page, you can see another web request has come in. So we have two web requests in here. And if I actually go to jobs, you're going to see that my protect job ran a few seconds ago. And if we look at the output of that job, what you're going to see is a bunch of information about the script that ran. So we have the ID of the event. We have the rule that triggered, so that was our web request rule. The script that was actually executed to generate this event. So you can see here it was the exact thing that I typed into my PowerShell console. And then content path, that would exist if I was running a script, but since I was just running it from the terminal, there's no content path. Application name will include information about the application. You can see I'm running pwsh.exe and the version. If I was using PowerShell Universal to use invoke web request, that would also show up here. And then you have things like username, computer name, whether or not they're running as administrator, the domain name, and a timestamp of the event. So we could take action here to send something into Slack that something weird is happening, or open a ticket somewhere, or send a page to someone that something is compromised in the environment. So PowerShell Protect kind of provides another layer of security. Obviously, there are ways to work around simple rules like this, but it could give you kind of early indication that something unusual is happening in your environment, and you could get audited or even block the scripts that are coming in. So in this video, we went over the new integration of PowerShell Protect and PowerShell Universal that you'll be able to take advantage of in the versions that are being released in June.